Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How are you all doing? First off, welcome to another episode of Iblis Manifestations. It has been quite some time since the last time I did one of these solo episodes. I believe that will have been back in March, so 4 months ago exactly. So to those of you who have actually followed me for this time, or if you've joined anywhere along the way, I do very much appreciate you listening to what myself and many of my guests on the show have had to say. There were certain things tonight that sparked a series of thoughts in my head which have existed in there for quite some time, and I figured that what would be the harm in sharing some of those? So, as you can see, I am in a slightly different kind of tone and mindset that I would normally be in if I was to do a show with a guest, as obviously, we as human beings, we've got this sort of thing where even though I might be talking to some of you now, technically I'm on my own in a dark room, so it's just me thinking out loud now, which is different to when you're in a social circumstances where you're somewhat projecting yourself and your thoughts in a way that, it's a very interesting way how we communicate to one another. But perhaps sometimes there's different benefits to this, whether if you're communicating with someone else, that can unlock certain things and have its own benefits, or if you're just thinking out loud, that can also have benefits of its own, and you can go places where normally you would not do with another person. So here are my thoughts, and I'm just gonna say what I have to say. There maybe plenty of scientific disclaimers that might be necessary, but I don't feel like I need to go there. I'm just gonna talk and say what I think. So let's talk about the multiverse. Now, I know that this is a concept which actually is more frequently becoming popular in the mainstream, I would say, but still, it's a very strange one. You see, I feel like there's before I go ahead, that's not specifically the thing that I want to talk about here, but I feel like it's a good starting point. The reason being that I feel when we are going through life, oftentimes we are presented with choices that feel like you can't avoid them, choices that feel that they are somehow bound by time and resources and knowledge. And I feel like every single one of these choices leads to a butterfly effect, which permanently change things. And these choices, I feel, are things that we go through on our day-to-day lives. It could be something as small as, well, I say small, but you could walk past a homeless person on the street and maybe you've got some change in your pocket and you want to give it to that person and you choose not to. Okay, that's fine. I'm not talking about the moral aspects of this, but rather how the causalities of this work and how one action can lead to different reactions and, cause and effect. So you could, for example, avoid giving money to that person, and maybe that person will struggle. But maybe further down the street, you might see another homeless person and you give them your change instead. And perhaps the change that you give that person could have a very big impact on their life. It could be something like that either allows them to survive, or maybe that helps them be able to afford the drug that they were after, and that just happens to be the night that they OD and die on the streets. And maybe if you're walking past in a different lifetime, at that exact same moment, you do the opposite. You pay the first person who, let's say, they get their food, and then when you get to the second person, you think, I've already spent my change. And then that creates for a different turn of events. Do you see where I'm going with here? Now, this can be anything, of course, there's going to be decisions regarding career, relationships, creative projects, just little things, like the one day where you just decide, I fancy going to this place. Like you just go to a bar for no reason because you have an inclination that you should. And then there you end up meeting the person who's going to be the love of your life or something along those lines. I don't know. Or maybe you end up getting mugged that night. I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make is that there's always these events in our lives which there seems to be some kind of inclination towards them where we deeply feel that we sometimes feel like we should do this. Let's take a chance on this thing. Or let's not take a chance on this thing. Let's try and see where this goes. Or sometimes, no, I don't feel like doing that tonight. There's a lot of very, very interesting things that happen within this world, which, the events that occur, everything is connected. Like, you cannot deny that. Yes, there's a lot of other things we could argue about, but every little thing has a domino effect. And we live in a constant state of domino effects. Sometimes you're the cause, and sometimes, it's just going through you. But really, it's one of them things that really makes you question whether we do exist in a simulation or not. And why did I mention the multiverse earlier? Well, the reason being that, yes, for example, we'll go with examples here to make it easier to understand, but let's say you're walking down the street, and at the end, you've only got the choice of turning right or left. Let's say in this lifetime, in this universe, you choose to go left. But what if there's a different version of you who chooses to go right? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, there's nothing more, I suppose, confusing than that thought. I suppose because we think of things like, we think of locations. When you think of a multiverse, you think of it in a way that, okay, that's in a different location in order for you to be able to imagine it. But it's not, so it becomes very confusing. Or at least that's how I process it. Maybe that's not the same for everyone, and maybe not everyone even thinks about such a thing. But I feel like there's plenty of moments that I've been through in my own life where I've made a choice or a decision to do something, and somehow I feel like there's other realities where there's different versions of me who have decided differently to how I did and had completely different outcomes. Like I first noticed this when I was 17 years old, where actually, and obviously Trivex comes up all the time, but I played a show with Trivex back on the 6th of September 2012. I will have been 17 years old then. And during this show, we actually played the O2 Academy in Birmingham, and I was very excited to play that show. And we were only opening for a shitty lineup. It was actually a promotions company called Catapult Club. We used to play a few shows for them. They used to basically just cram a bunch of bands together basically like not really pay you that well. It was some fucked up deal where it's like you sold the tickets yourself for like £5, and then per ticket you got £1 each or something. It was pretty fucked. So anyway, we did this show, and obviously at the time I was still very raw, and I thought, it was like everything was gonna happen overnight. I didn't really have the understanding that I needed to for how music actually worked. I was just thinking that, okay, I've come from Iran, I've got the freedom now, so that automatically means that I'm gonna get heard and everyone's gonna become a Tribex fan all across the world, so that was kind of my mindset at the time, which is a 17-year-old, you can imagine, a 17-year-old in a country on his own. It's pretty fucking crazy. But why do I mention that event is because after that show, there was just a feeling in me that I just could not get over. It's a feeling that I cannot in any way, shape or form describe. But when the show itself, let me explain, there wasn't many people there, but I played the show as if there was like hundreds of thousands of people there. And I've kind of had that approach a lot of times anyway, which is, could have been to my detriment at times, but also it's something that has mentally helped me cross the threshold and reach places where I feel like I would have never reached otherwise. And I feel like not many other people have gone to that place within themselves, which I have somehow discovered through performing music. I'm sure there's probably other mediums for it too, but this feeling which existed inside me on that night led me to... I basically kept hanging out with one of the audience members. He had come all the way... Well, I say all the way. He had just come from down the road, I think. His name was Rob. I've not spoke to the guy in many years, but he came out and I was like, okay, this is the one person who actually came to watch my show. All my bandmates at the time, they just went to their homes, I mean, they're 17-year-old kids, why should they give a fuck? But, it's not their responsibility that I have this feeling inside me, this eating away at me that I cannot describe to anyone else. And I myself don't even know it that well yet at that point. So I started hanging out with this guy, Rob, and we went and bought a bottle of Famous Grouse from the off license just across the road from the O2 Academy in Birmingham. And so throughout the night, I pretty much drank the whole thing. And I don't really remember much from that. That was the first time I actually got blackout drunk. And it was pretty terrifying because I don't remember anything that happened. I just have very, 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 very vague memories of being dropped off at the place that I lived in by the police. And then just waking up in the morning with ECG stickers all around me. Now, I never told this story public before, but there's a reason why I'm mentioning it now. So basically, yeah, that's kind of what happened, and this was really fucking weird because I had such horrendous anxiety about the whole event because I recalled nothing. I mean, a 17-year-old kid, I mean, I get it. I wasn't the average 17-year-old, but I had no, I mean, at the time, I didn't train. I had nothing. I was just a guitar player, man. I was just a guitar player from Iran who was, pretty had an explosive kind of personality, but I was still pretty shy and awkward at the same time too. It was just, it was a very weird paradox of all of those things, which I was at the time. Still maybe am to some extent, but I don't really feel awkward around people anymore. So anyway, so the memories that I have of that incident is that the ones that I do have is I remember maybe being in a parking lot and screaming my head off and crying. There's a feeling about that, when I think of it, I feel like I remember the feeling of going through that and as if I want to cry and scream, and I don't know why that is. And besides that, I unfortunately I don't really remember a lot else. I still don't know what happened today. And the day after this happened, I went with the person that I was living with at the time. I went to check with the police stations to be like, hey, have you had any records of anything happening with a person like this last night? And there was nothing there. So, and even if there was, I don't think it could have really told us much, to be honest. So, yeah, that's it's like a blank moment in my life, which confuses the hell out of me. Now, obviously, there's a lot of philosophical things that we could get into and moral lessons for younger people and what it means to be on a country on your own, away from your parents, performing music that could have gotten you killed a few months ago, and now you're doing it, yet no one really gives a shit that you're doing it. Having to live with all of those feelings as a 17-year-old, I feel like it was a lot. Not the worst thing that has obviously happened to anyone in the world. That's just a part of my journey, which constructed me and forged the person that I am today. Well, as a part of it anyway. So, why do I bring this story up? The reason is because ever since that happened, and from not long after that happened, there's a part of me that very strongly believes that and I can't tell you why exactly I feel this, but it's just an internal feeling that I have, which when I think about it, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I don't know how to explain this, but there's a part of me which is certain that in another dimension, perhaps, or in a different multiverse or whatever, I died that night. I feel like I know that happened. Now, of course, I'm here alive, speaking to you now, and my voice is being recorded, but I feel like in another lifetime, at the same event, I stopped existing. And, I feel like ever since then, I've not quite been the same. And I don't know how to differentiate that I've not been the same, but it's like it's an awareness which I carry with me, Maybe it's just a case of brain damage from drinking too much alcohol. Who fucking knows? I feel like I'm a pretty fucking intelligent person, actually. So I don't know if it's that, but I feel like there's something that happened. And this is the point that I wanted to bring you, that I feel like our world and universe is bound by law for us to have to make decisions, because events have to pass through us, and you simply get, you get different choices, and more recently I have had to face this more and more and more and more. And sometimes if you don't make the choices that you need to make within the time frame which you are supposed to make those choices, the choices will be made for you. And oftentimes, if that is how a decision gets made for you, that is the worst thing, I feel. The worst thing as in it will have the worst consequences for you, as in it will have the worst results. But it's really hard to tell, right? Because, when you have to take into consideration karmic effects and things like that, that becomes a whole different topic of discussion. But really, I'm of a strong belief that things, I feel like, it's multiple things I'm trying to cover here, but really, it's like when you're going through life, and then you've got deadlines and things like that. I mean, recently I've had some personal things occur again, and I had to make decisions which had to be swift, and they were tough decisions. But now that a little bit of time has gone by, it's like, phew, okay, I'm glad I made that decision, because had I just sat on it, I would have been completely fucked right now, like, permanently. And unfortunately, I can't disclose exactly what that was, but just trust that I mean what I'm saying, right? And time, again, like I said, time always ties in with these kind of decisions. Because, I mean, it's the same as this. If you're in the woods and a bear approaches you, or you can see one nearby, you have a multitude of choices to try and survive that situation. But those decisions that you make are all bound by time. Because if you wait around for too long, that thing's gonna get closer, right? But then, maybe if you run straight away, then you'll startle it. So there's always these fucking choices that life throws at us, and it sucks to have to face that sometimes. It really does. Or sometimes you just have to get rid of a person out of your life, and that fucking really sucks too. I hate that. I really, really hate that part, and I've had to do it way more times than I would have liked to have done in the last few years of my life. But it's almost like every time that's led to some kind of growth, there's always this thing of like, as soon as one door closes, another opens. I discussed this a little bit with Esther Segara on episode 12, I believe, which I recommend you guys to look into. But it's a very interesting thing, like not holding on to one thing and just keeping your eyes open, because life is constant change, it's constant movement, it's constant growth. But back to the point that I was trying to make, I feel like there's definitely a sense that we could be living inside a simulation. Now, when you say that, a lot of you might argue, well, okay, if that's the case, then why bother with things like, for example, physical wellness, which all of you know I'm fully about that. And the reason is because, let's say it is a simulation. Let's say life is a game. You are still bound by the rules of the game. I say that as the number of my recorded reaches 666. Let's move past it now. But you have to play the rules. But once you understand the rules, once you understand how the game works, then you can actually manipulate this game into whatever the fuck you want it to be. You can get the results of whatever you want. You can become whatever it is that you want to become in this life. Of course, you have to pay the price, and there's always a window. And time, as I keep saying, is the thing that is connected to all of it. And that is your biggest currency and your biggest resource. And just waiting around is not going to really do much. Again, like I said, it's a case of decisions being made for you, right? So, yeah, and it's a very hard thing, but I feel like there's a certain thing that I do. Okay, I've kind of been just kind of beating around the bush here, but I do believe that we live in a simulation. Now, this could be anything. I feel like our consciousness could be just an extension of our solar system, perhaps. Could be anything. Let's say we could be a part of the sun. Look at it like this, because let's, for example, say the Earth. Obviously the inside of the Earth is a hot core, which is similar to that of the sun. So all of the planets, we could all be the sun's stillborn children, in one way you could say. So what's to say that as a result of the friction that's between the planet and the sun, we're now not just a manifestation of the planet's consciousness, and therefore the one of the sun, seeping through the surface, trying to actually exist and be alive. And this also actually helps us experience time in a much slower way and much less painful way, because existence is really suffering if you think about it. Because look, if you look at the Earth, let's say an explosion occurs and the Earth is trying to get away from the sun, and initially it gets to a certain point, but then the sun, obviously with its extreme gravitational pull, keeps pulling the Earth towards itself, And as a result of this constant struggle, we end up in a state where we're constantly going around the sun in circles, right? Now, obviously, imagine that's the whole solar system, but let's just look at the Earth like that, right? And of course, I'm not a scientist, but I feel like that's a very basic understanding of where we sit. I'm more than happy for anyone to correct me if I'm wrong on any of that analogy, but let's look at it like that, okay? Now, this is a pretty painful fucking experience that your whole existence is just going around the circle in the midst of this gravitational war, if you will, and eventually you know that this motherfucker is gonna blow up. The sun's eventually gonna collapse. Obviously, you can think of life on Earth, but let's say that we all are the same consciousness of the Earth at one time, and that let's look at it from the perspective that we are all the same perspective. This thing is eventually gonna go off. You know, like obviously there's things that threaten life on Earth. It could be comets, whatever. But let's say if the sun goes out, I say this as my time turns 22, and let's say if the sun actually goes out, then that's it. Game over. Bye-bye. We're fucked. Okay? Let's say if there's no human left on Earth, yet we're still somehow existing as this combined unit of consciousness that's within the Earth, we're still fucked when that happens, okay? So try to think of the world in a way that it still carries on when you die, because that's what happens, okay? When you die, you only change format. You might not exist as the same person anymore, but your whatever your substance is, that thing is still there somehow, okay? Energy never gets created or destroyed. It only changes format. Okay, so keep that in mind. But I feel like there's this so with that kind of relationship between the Earth and the sun, that is of course if we are even from the Earth. That's a different story, but you know, we could, it's very possible, I feel, that there's this consciousness that's within the Earth, which, again, is originally sourced from the sun, and that this consciousness is just fucking fed up. It's had enough of the shit that it's going through, you know, so it's breaking down into pieces. Now, obviously, you would say, well, why the fuck does this not happen on the other planets? Why is there not life on the other ones? And, you know, I think that would be a very valid question. But also, we don't really know that for sure. You know what I mean? As we know, we started really fucking tiny. If we were still single-cell organisms, if someone else from a different planet had our same sort of equipment, let's say, or technology, they wouldn't have been able to fucking see us, man. You know, so that could still exist all the places, and time again is very relevant. You know, maybe this has existed in all the planets, but maybe not. I don't know. I'm going into a different territory here than the one which I was initially actually talking about, and it's that I feel like we are just particles of a greater consciousness that is, let's say, of the Earth, if we are from the Earth, of course. And we are broken into a million pieces or billion pieces just to experience consciousness from different points. But as Aleister Crowley said, every man and every woman is a star. And I really want you to think about that saying in the context of what I am saying now. You know, the material that us humans are even made from, you can the hydrogen that is only found in the ashes of a star, basically. Now I might be butchering that, but that is actually the case. You know, that's why I'm gonna give away something here. But there's a Tribex song on our next album, which some of you will hear more about soon, but there's a song on there called Twilight of Death, and the very opening line of that motherfucker is, I am a dead star dreaming. I am a dead star dreaming. I am a dead star dreaming. Think about it. Right? That is crazy. But I feel that might be one of the closest things that we actually have to the truth. And it is possible that this simulation that I talk about, or many other people do now, for example, could be somehow a part of it could be very much a part of this dying star trying to save itself. Maybe this is not the first time that this world has existed. Maybe this is not the first time you and I have lived the lifetime that we have lived. And maybe we have to keep going in circles over and over and over and over again until somehow we get these events right. Until somehow things land in the way that they were supposed to. Now, I feel like to a great extent religion could be playing a role here, but I don't know. I'm just speaking by instinct here, by the way. I don't know shit, right? I feel like it's a time like this, at a conversation like this, where it would be very interesting to uncover maybe what kind of information exists beneath the Vatican, or maybe what kind of information existed at the Library of Alexandria, or maybe, I don't know. I really don't know. I can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing that I don't know. But I know that I want to know. You know what I mean? Anyway. There's a lot of very interesting things about our world. And I know that we like the notion of saying that the older you get, the lesser you feel like you know it. That you know anything. I don't think that's entirely true. Because, yes, it's in one way, it's good to have that bit of humility in your wisdom, but I also feel like that might just be a distraction from how close you might actually be getting to knowing something. So, yeah, who knows? Who knows? Who knows where the fucking eye at the top of the pyramid fucking went? Maybe that was some kind of device, that we could have used to communicate with the aliens. Maybe God was an alien, because in Christianity, okay, all right. Take a step back, listen to this, right? It's just a theory. I'm not spitting facts. And if I am, it's unknowingly, right? But just a theory. Like, for example, how in Christianity, especially like on the Protestant side, if you look into it, they believe that Jesus is sort of humanity's key to access God and the higher state that God is, because Jesus is, he's still one of us. But because he's the Son of God, you can like reach God through him. Now there's a whole story of, Father, why have you forsaken me? This and that. Who's to say that Jesus wasn't some kind of like genetically engineered human by the aliens, and that when he was on the cross, he was expecting the aliens to come and save his ass, and they didn't. They left him there, and he died. Right? Obviously, you can contest the story itself as much as you want, but there's too much that's in our world that leads back to these things, which is a very obviously uncomfortable thought. Like, actually, the thought of aliens is, whilst I'm open to it, it's actually really uncomfortable. And obviously, I'm sure that some of you would be aware of some of the humans that existed before with the really like super long heads, and it's like, who was that? Where did these guys come from? Why do we keep seeing the same thing everywhere? And I don't know. Maybe I'm just chatting shit, but it's just thoughts that go through my head, and I feel like there's some weight to them, right? I'm not living by these thoughts, but they feel pretty true when I think about them, and I'm just putting this out there. I'm not trying to sell you anything or even sell myself anything. I'm just exercising the crazy batshit fucking thoughts that are inside my own fucking head. And maybe some of you can relate to that, maybe some of you don't. But at the moment, I'm honestly not even paying that much attention to the fact that there might be those listening. I am purely speaking my mind freely and without any barriers. I'm actually quite enjoying that. So yeah, there's a lot of things in our world which, I feel like you sometimes have to be an expert of something to explain things, but I also feel like the way the system is laid out is like you have to become an expert, but in order to become an expert at one specific thing, you then end up dedicating all your time to it, and somehow then your legacy is buried. That's just the way I feel about the world, and that's just how I feel like whenever you get close to that truth, somehow there's something there that somehow just tries to fuck with you, right? Whether that's for your own good or not, I feel like there's something there, right? I'm not necessarily resisting it. I'm just acknowledging that there's something there that I feel like constantly tries to stop us from getting close to the fucking truth, right? Like, what the hell are even churches and cathedrals? Those things are fucking machines. They're not places of worship for sentimental reasons. They collect brainwaves. Wow, I'm really going there. Yeah, just think about it. Think about all the machinery. Think about all the noises that they play in these places. And the effect that has on the subconsciousness and the brainwaves. Brainwaves are a real fucking thing. I mean, of course they are, right? I sound so dumb when I put it down like that, but there's a way to these things. I think we've become so goddamn cynical in our world that we dismiss everything and anything. And you know what? There's like so much actual bullshit that's out there as well. Like, for example, like the whole flat earth thing. I don't get that. I think that's dumb. Right? If you can genuinely prove that that's the case, then it only means that we are inside the simulation indeed, right? And the simulation being more of a computer one rather than the different one that I can think of, which I think is the case. But I don't think the Earth is flat, man. It's not a matter of opinion even. It's really dumb. But this is the point I'm trying to make, is that there's also so much crap out there that anything that could have any weight to it, it's like it's muddied waters. You can't fucking find the truth anymore unless it's some kind of mainstream information, and that bothers the fuck out of me, man. That really bothers the hell out of me. Like, why would you put us in this situation? Like, I'm sure the truth is more important than just sucking the planet dry. I feel like every child that comes into this world has the purpose of actually finding the fucking truth. That I genuinely believe that. And we put up with it. We go through our day-to-day lives. We use all the resources for every single person to exist so that eventually one person, or maybe a group of people, or maybe all of us, actually end up discovering the fucking truth. Otherwise, there is no point to any of this, and I refuse to believe that to be the case. I refuse that notion vehemently. I feel like every person that's born, there's a reason for them to be around. There's a reason why they manifested in this format, in this universe, in this simulation, whatever you want to call it. And eventually we're going to figure that out. And I hope to whatever's out there that we're going to figure this out before it's too late. And that's all I'm going to say to that. Thank you all for listening to my ramblings on this evening. Take it however way you will. I am just opening the Pandora's box, which is my mind, and hoping that somehow some positive outcome will come of this. Okay? Maybe there might even be consequences. Who fucking knows? You know, maybe years from now I'll become like a super famous person, and then people will revisit this and be like, oh shit, this guy was totally off his nut. But you know what? This is my truth. Or at least what feels like the truth to me at this moment in time. Although a lot of these are ideas that I've developed in my mind throughout this time. And actually there's a lot more which I'm currently not sharing, but I feel like I've said what I needed to say at this moment in time. So to any of you listening, I do very much appreciate you. And I hope that you enjoyed this. I thank you for listening. And if any of this resonates with you in the sense that it does make you want to be at least a good person, or at least get closer to the truth, whatever the truth is, okay, then power to you, okay? And don't ever let anyone silence you for that. So, with that in mind, I'd like to wish you all a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, midnight, wherever it is you are. And I hope that, we all do get closer to the truth, whatever the heck it is, and that this is all not just for nothing. Okay? So, yeah. I thank you all for listening to the podcast, and I hope to see you all on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations. Take care, people.